by State Affairs Committee. In the House of Representatives, House Bill 212 by Local Government Committee. In the House of Representatives, House Bill 417 by Appropriations Committee. In the House of Representatives, House Bill 418 by Appropriations Committee.
House Bill 391, 148, 212, 417, and 418 will all be referred to the 13th order of business for the third reading.
There is no further business in the 12th order, Mr. President.
The Senate will then advance to the 13th order of business, third reading of bills. The Senate is at the 13th order.
Mr. President.
Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that House Bill 248 and House Bill 25 hold their place on the calendar for one legislative day.
248 and 25. Is there an objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered.
And Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that House Bill 337 hold its place until March 27.
You've heard the request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. The Senate will now have before it for final consideration House Bill number 321. The Senate Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 321 by Ways and Means Committee, an act relating to property rights to establish provisions.
Mr. President.
Senator Keiser.
Mr. President, I ask that for unanimous consent that further reading of House Bill 321 be dispensed with and that the journal show has been read a third time at length, section by section, and placed before the Senate for final consideration.
Thank you, Senator Keiser. You've heard the request. There's no objection. Hearing none, Senator, you have the floor to begin the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, this bill, House Bill 321, is commonly referred to as the squatters bill. It allows for the removal of unauthorized persons from property so long as certain conditions are met. It provides an 8-point criteria that a homeowner can then use to file a complaint with the sheriff. Provides a copy of what a complaint would require, and that would have to be substantially followed. This would not apply to anybody that is a current tenant or a recent tenant that had a contract, written or oral contract, so only unauthorized personnel. Upon receipt of a complaint, the sheriff would then have to determine that it is in fact a wrongful unauthorized person and that the person filing a complaint is the authorized owner. If for any reason there was a wrongful removal from a property, a person would be able to file civilly to recover any damages. Additionally, it provides penalties. So if someone that's an unauthorized person residing in a home provides documentation that's false, knowingly falsified documentation that claims they're the owner or have authorization to be there, it would be a misdemeanor. Additionally, anybody that was to advertise for sale or be renting to someone knowing that it's false would provide a felony penalty for that as well. So with that, I ask for your aye vote, and debate is open.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, Senator, you have the floor to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Debate is closed.
Thank you. Debate is closed. The question before the Senate is, shall House Bill number 321 pass the Senate? The Secretary will poll the members.
Adams, Anthony, Berndt, Bierke, Blaylock, Burtonshaw, Carlson, Cook, Den Hartog, Foreman, Galloway, Grove, Guthrie, Harris, Hart, Keiser, Cole, Lakey, Lenny, Lind, Nichols, Okonowitz, Patterson, Ricks, Ruckte, Semmelroff, Shippey, Taylor, Taves, Van Orden, Wintrow, Wooler, Woodward, Cito, Seiderveld.
The vote count shows 35 in favor with none against, a majority having voted in the affirmative. House Bill number 321 has passed the Senate. Hearing no correction of title, the title is approved and the bill will be returned to the House of Representatives. The Senate will now have before it for final consideration Senate Bill 291. The Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 291 by Education Committee, an act relating to education to establish provisions regarding the Idaho High Needs Student Fund, declaring an emergency and providing an effective date.
Mr. President,
Senator Blaylock.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of House Bill 291 be dispensed with. And the journal show it has been read a third time at length, section by section, and placed before the Senate for final consideration.
Is there an objection? Hearing none. Senator Blaylock, you have the floor to open the debate.
Yes, okay, thank you. Senators, what you have before you is House Bill 291, which creates a high-need student fund. This fund will reimburse districts and charters for costs that they are spending to educate a small number of students with very high special needs. Services that are required under federal law. At its core, House Bill 291 is about fulfilling our constitutional responsibility to maintain a public school system that serves every child in Idaho with no exceptions. This is a bill about honoring our uniquely American belief that every child deserves access to education, not just the ones that are easy to teach or inexpensive to serve. This is a commitment to education. This commitment to education means that we educate students with varying disabilities in our public schools. The vast majority of those students who fall under special education thrive in the environments our local schools have created for them. This bill helps school districts educate the small number of special needs education students who fall under the category of high need. If you look at the first page of the bill, you can see high need is defined as students whose special education related costs exceed $15,000. Costs that are directly tied to their individualized education plan or IEP, and not covered by other funding sources like Medicaid. Again, most students who receive special education services don't come close to that $15,000 threshold. But for the small number of special need kiddos, this cost can add up quite quickly. So let me give you some examples, real life examples from one of the two school districts in my district. Currently, we have a student who requires an American Sign Language interpreter every day, all day. That costs $55,000 a year. Private insurance does not cover that cost, and there is no Medicaid reimbursement for that service. We have another student who requires two behavioral interventionists. The student is uninsured and Medicaid will only cover one, so the district absorbs the extra $49,800 per year. Another student has a behavioral interventionalist, an occupational therapy, speech therapy, and an AAC device. Services that cost a total of over $65,000 a year with minimal insurance coverage and no Medicaid support. Additionally, for students who require one-on-one behavioral or nursing support all day, every day, the costs range anywhere from $51,000 to $89,000 per year. And that's before factoring in additional services like therapy. These are not hypothetical numbers. These are real students in real classrooms with real cost. So how are districts paying for this right now? They are pulling from existing state and local budgets. Some districts have passed bonds to help cover the cost. And it's a financial strain that not only affects special education, but also impacts the district's ability to plan and budget effectively to educate all of the students in their district. This bill helps alleviate some of that pressure, and here's how. So this bill will create a high needs student fund, and this program is a last dollar program, meaning schools must exhaust every other funding option before they can apply to the Department of Education for reimbursement from this fund. And I'll walk through how the funding works. This is on page 2 of the bill as well. So if a student's special education costs go beyond $15,000, the fund will reimburse 100% of the next $50,000 in cost. After that, this fund would cover 80% of the remaining amount, not to exceed $100,000. And to make sure that this fund is distributed fairly across school districts, no single school district can receive more than 5% of the total fund in a given year. This fund is needed. If you've met with any of your school leaders recently, then you know that special education funding is a real challenge. Right now, Idaho is only one of 2 states that doesn't have a fund like this. One of 2 states that doesn't have a program or a fund like this. This bill does not incentivize a district to create a program or solicit students to meet the specific requirements of this bill because it's a reimbursement program after all other revenue options have been exercised. And after costs have been verified by the state according to the federal requirements. This legislature has asked that our local school boards take their budgeting seriously and do it efficiently. They can't plan for every student that walks through the door. This bill recognizes that uncertainty and creates a mechanism for them to address their students in the ways they need it and the way that the federal courts require. The question is whether we're going to help our schools meet those obligations or leave them navigating these costs with their local taxpayers and just hope that they don't end up in a lawsuit. With that, Mr. President, debate is open.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. President. You have some handouts that are on your desk, and I really do appreciate the intent of this bill, but I just wanted to bring some things to the floor as part of the debate. And so, yes, this bill does propose a new $3 million special needs fund. We already have 4 different funding sources, and so this would make a 5th funding source. Right now we have a current funding formula, a separate appropriation for emotionally disturbed kids, funding for residential facilities, and discretionary funding. So this would add, like I said, a 5th source, which would also add complexity and cost. Currently there are 28 separate line items, and that's on a sheet that you have on your handout, and this is for public school funding, and this bill would make the 29th. We are already appropriating over $3.3 billion to K through 12 education, and so my concern is that we're going to create another program specifically for special needs students, but we already have several of those that should be doing the job. The real concern here that I have, though, is how this bill contributes to the broader issue of government growth. The Office of Performance Evaluation has suggested that special needs could absorb $82.2 million in funding, and this is exactly how government grows. It starts out small, so $3 million in this case for funding, and then increases every year like we've seen in other examples. On one of your handouts, you'll see that there's a literacy line item, and we just added with Senate Bill 1069 an additional $5 million, and that was for the literacy program, bringing the total to over $78 million. Yet despite this increase of spending, we are not seeing the improving outcome results. So each year we're introducing new programs and more funding and more government bureaucracy. These programs, like I said, most of them are very well-meaning like this one, but they expand year after year without results or accountability, ultimately leading to more government and more taxpayer dollars being spent with little to no return in our investment. My concern is as we go down this path that we are going to continue to grow government without real results for our children. So instead of creating a new program every year, we should be focusing on consolidating overlapping programs and transferring already existing funds and making existing programs work better, not through new spending. So I'm concerned that, again, that another program will continue to trend the expansion of government and spending, and that we aren't going to be getting the results that we are wanting from this. I do want to make sure, we help kids, but I think we have funds in other programs that we can already utilize, like I said, with the other 4 funding sources that we have for special education. And that's where my concern comes into play, is that we will just be creating another one that we're going to be adding more money to, and it might start with $3 million now, but it will probably increase. There was a few handouts that were given, and like I said, I really want to hone in on the $82.2 million that was suggested by the performance evaluations of what could be absorbed, and that is far from the $3 million, and that's where my concern on growth in the spending comes from. So just wanted to bring that information out there and have you consider that as we debate this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President,
Senator Lamb,
you debate the bill.
you have the floor, Senator.
I'd like to thank the senator from 10, and if you would, look at that number, 82.2 million. I would want to be careful when I would say little or no return if I was speaking to a parent of a student who benefited from these dollars. One of the effects when we change the way we fund education, and I'll speak specifically to privatized education, is that we'll see more and more of those students who are not accepted at those schools come into our public setting. Our public schools are required by law to accept these students. So we see here that there's $82 million in a deficit there. Do you realize that money's being spent? This is not new money. These districts are making up that money out of their general fund. And where do they get that money? They get it from property taxes. All this is the state's trying to, again, step in and help alleviate some of that local burden on our communities. We've done this in many ways, but this is not new money. This is the state saying we can follow suit with, I think I heard every other state but us has followed this pattern. So we're not inventing this. This is not new, and this is not new money. So let's be supportive of our local districts. Let's be supportive of public education and help them fund and serve these students. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Woodward.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to re-emphasize or emphasize what I just heard from the senator from 33, and looking in that second paragraph on this handout, instead of just showing the difference, seeing that districts are spending over $210 million, while we're providing them 134. They're spending over $210 million to comply with federal and state laws, the requirements we've placed upon them. It seems, when we talk about it here, and it's a little, what are special needs students? This particular example I can provide that was shared with me recently in the Boundary County School District. They have a young man who has behavior issues. But he is allowed to come into that school district. He's 270 pounds. He's a big boy, a young man, but a big boy. And so how do you manage him when he has aggressive behavior during the day? You have to have one or two people there, because if you're going to have one person to manage a 270 pounder, you better have the right one person. And so these are the kind of situations we're trying to deal with here, acknowledging that we keep the doors open for all. We try to provide that uniform education for all, but it takes a little bit more. And I think you can see that in the graph at the bottom of the page, that we oftentimes consider Utah a state to look to, and look at what they are doing in comparison to us when they allocate funding for students with these that have placed these requirements on our system. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President,
Senator Adams.
the senator from District 11 yield to a question.
Senator Blaylock, will you yield to a question?
Yes, I yield.
Senator yields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good, Senator. This would appropriate $3 million is there a reason why we're not putting it in in a fund that's already established to address these demographics?
Senator Blaylock.
Thank you, Mr. President. This fund is written specifically to meet this high-need population, and which we don't have set up in the state, so it would be its own fund.
Mr. President, would the senator yield to an
Senator
additional?
Blaylock, will you yield to another question?
Yes.
Senator yields.
Thank you, Mr. President. So am I to understand that the funds that we already appropriate for special needs don't address high-level special needs?
Senator Blaylock.
Mr. President, there is no distinction. Special needs is special needs within the state. So this would be additional monies that districts could use to reimburse the additional cost for the higher need special needs kids and the services that they require.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President,
Senator Lanning.
I'd like to debate the bill.
You have the floor, Senator.
Thank you. I'm pretty concerned, Mr. President, because what happened to local control? We always talk about local control and not the heavy hand of the state coming down on the schools, but when it involves money, it seems like local control becomes a ghost. As was stated by the senator from 10, this adds $3 million to a little over $3 billion, which I think is unwise because it seems to fly in the face of what's going on at the national level. We're closing the Department of Education. We got the Trump train going full steam ahead, and this bill seems like a little sidecar pumping, going the opposite direction. We should be prioritizing efficiency over expansion, and we should be cutting and consolidating what we already have instead of creating brand new multi-million-dollar programs. It was said that this is not new money. It's absolutely new money, Mr. President. The fiscal note says this legislation creates a fund that is subject to appropriation, which can be whatever we want, open-ended appropriation, and is accounted for in the governor's fiscal year 2026 K through 12 budget. It's absolutely new money, creating a new fund. The public school system right now has never had more money ever than they have right now. So again, we should be consolidating, cutting, and focusing on efficiency, not creating brand new programs out of nowhere. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Van Orden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few comments to what the debate that's already happened. Most of our funds for special needs students come from the federal level under the Individuals with Disabilities Act. And as the good senator from 13 said, there is a lot going on at the federal level. And with the dismantling of the Department of Education, it's been said that they are going to keep the Individuals with the Disabilities Act, but they are going to remove what's called the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Education. So we are still going to have some requirements to meet, and I don't know we don't know if the funding is going to be coming. So for us to be able to meet those needs for those students in the future, we're going to have something like this. And is it going to be filled with $82.2 million? No, it's not. The districts will still get some, but we need to help them because that's what we're trying to do now. And these students, when you talk about a return on investment for these students, I don't know what that looks like because these are special needs students and the districts are trying to meet their needs the best that they can. But a return on investment is not like a regular student return on investment. The return on investment is meeting the needs of these students. So I feel like this fund is needed. However, how much goes in there that's up to JFAC to be able to do that. So I would support this bill. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President,
Senator Ricks.
to debate in favor of the bill.
You have the floor, Senator.
Senators, I worked for 15 years in a disability services office at a university. I worked with a number of students. I provided technical support for them, assistive technology type things. I see a lot of the money that could be used in this area would be going to students like that. To provide services for deaf and hard of hearing students are expensive. Captioners or sign language are very expensive. In fact, captioning is something that's used here in the State House. If you bring up the video of this session right now, you can click the button and do the transcriptions underneath. Somebody behind the system is typing up what we're saying. Those services do cost a lot. I also worked with blind and low vision students. There's special screen readers that are used that say everything that's on the screen. So a blind person can read that real fast back to them. But some of this technology and these services help the kids get on an equal playing field. They're not able to do that without some additional assistive technology or other people helping them in some situations. This helps our students who are in this category become productive and be self-sufficient later on. The students in the college setting that had a little bit of this help and this technology, when they came into the college setting, were far ahead of others who did not have that. But I think this is a good use of our funds, and I think it will help the students that really need this. I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Hearing none. Senator Blaylock, you're recognized to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President, and senators that debated this bill. Just a couple points. Again, the schools are required to educate all students that walk through their door. And we're not talking about general special needs. It feels like every kid has ADHD nowadays. We're not talking about those kids. They fall under the normal funding mechanisms that we have in place. We are talking about high need students. And what I like about this bill and why I think it is responsible is the district has skin in the game for these students. They have to pay the first $15,000 out of their funds. And if there's anything on top of that, then they can apply to be reimbursed. And it's a reimbursement because they have to pay the bill in the first place. The bill is getting paid. And so this bill would help alleviate the costs that they are already paying. And why are they paying it? Again, because the feds require it. And it's probably cheaper to pay that than to go fight a lawsuit. I want to make a couple points. I know there was some that this would be a fifth funding source. It would be a fifth funding source, but again, it's the last funding source. Everything else has to be exhausted, from private insurance to Medicaid to any other funding grants that they have within their district. Anything that could help cover these costs, they have to submit all of that to the district. The district can then determine that they are going to get a reimbursement. Again, not funds to say, here's money and go spend it how you want. This is a reimbursement for costs that they've already paid for. And when we talk about the Department of Education at the federal level, there's a lot of unknowns there. I mean, I hate to say it, but Idaho is a welfare state. We get more back from the feds than we give to them, to the tune of almost $300 million is what we're going to be short. And if we still have the requirements of educating every student, and those high need students especially, we haven't even begun to address that issue within our state. Again, we're one of 2 states that doesn't have this fund. If we have those same requirements, that will be a big issue for our state when we're addressing where we're going to cut. I think this is the right thing to do. You know, America, we are unique in our education system that we don't turn anybody away. And sorry, my phone is propping my mic up and someone's calling me. I am so sorry. We educate everybody in America. And again, that is unique to our country. Not every country does that. I think it's a good thing. But with that comes these additional costs. And that's why I think passing this is the right thing to do for our school districts. Thank you, Mr. President. Debate is closed.
Thank you. The debate is closed. The question before the Senate is, shall House Bill number 291 pass the Senate? The Senate Secretary will call the roll.
Adams, Anthony, Byrd, Bierke, Blaylock, Burtonshaw, Carlson, Cook, Den Hartog, Foreman, Galloway, Grow, Guthrie, Harris, Hart, Kaiser, Cole, Lakey, Lenny, Lind, Nichols, Okonowitz, Patterson, Ricks, Ruckty, Semmelroth, Shippey, Taylor, Tabes, Van Orden, Wintrow, Buller, Woodward, Cito, Seiderveld, Bierke.
Mr. President, how did I vote?
Senator Adams, you voted yes.
Can you please change my vote to nay?
Senator Adams changes his yes vote to no. The vote count shows 17 in favor with 18 against. House Bill 291 has failed to pass the Senate and will be returned to the House of Representatives. The Senate will have before for final consideration House Bill number 352. The Senate Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 352 by Education Committee, an act relating to education to revise provisions regarding parental rights in education.
Mr. President.
Senator Carlson.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of House Bill 352 be dispensed with, and the journal show that it has been read the 3rd time at length, section by section, and placed before the Senate for final consideration.
Is there an objection? Hearing none. Senator Carlson, you have the floor to open the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 352 is pretty straightforward. This bill amends Idaho's parental rights statute to include a provision that requires schools to adopt procedures and policies that prohibit the formal instruction of sexual orientation and gender identity for grades K through 12. I'm going to read the section of the bill. It's just about 2 or 3 sentences. A public school shall be required to adopt procedures and policies that prohibit classroom instruction by public school personnel on sexual orientation or gender identity from kindergarten through grade 12, or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. That's what the bill does. It does not prohibit instruction regarding human biology, things like anatomy, human reproduction, physiology, and health, or the difference between boys and girls, things that are basic to our understanding of human health. These things will still be taught. It only prohibits formal classroom instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity. I believe the best place for conversations on these topics are in the home, not the classroom. I think parents need to take the lead in determining how and when to introduce these topics to their children. These are sensitive topics and should be handled in a way that parents should determine. This is a good bill that will build on Idaho's strong commitment to our families, and it will go a long way in restoring trust between our schools and our parents. With that, Mr. President, debate is open.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Wintrow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the senator from 7 stand for a question?
Senator Carlson, do you yield to a question?
Yes, Senator will yield.
The senator yields.
Thank you, Mr. President, and Senator from 7. I'm interested in understanding what it means as far as prohibiting instruction, because I think you said we could talk about what it means to be a boy and a girl, but that is gender identity. So I'm just wondering what would be prohibited in the instruction.
Senator Carlson.
I'm not going to tell you what's prohibited. Well, yes, I can, but human biology, when you teach human biology in the upper grades and anatomy, that is what is not prohibited. And so anything other than that, you can talk about what's a male and what's a female. That is what the bill talks about.
Thank you, Mr. President. To debate against the bill.
You have the floor, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. First and foremost, I think this is just one more policy that puts a burden on teachers and basically says we don't trust you to teach what is appropriate and age appropriate, I should say. I think it's just another burden that we're going to add on to our teachers when they know what to teach. Albert Einstein once said, education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned in school. And to me, education is more than just grammar and arithmetic and reading. It is about critical thinking. And it's about interacting with others. It's about learning compassion. It's about sharing. It's about how to socialize. It's about how to talk about one's life and respect each other's in the classroom's lives. And I think this bill actually is limiting intentionally the ability for people to talk about their life. I mean, what happens when a child comes to their teacher and shows them a picture of their parents and it's two moms? And the other student says, oh, what's that? You can't talk about it? We have gay people in our communities and in our classrooms and parents. We have people who are trans. We have people who are of all lived experiences. And to just erase those, I think is lacks a lot of foresight and compassion to kids. I just think this bill robs our children and our parents of the ability to teach the whole experience of what it means to be a human and not just about your brain. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further debate? Hearing none. Senator Carlson, you have the floor to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill does not limit students from discussing these topics with a counselor. And this only prohibits this in regards to classroom instruction. With that, debate is closed.
Debate is closed. The question before the Senate is, shall House Bill number 352 pass the Senate? The Secretary will call the roll.
Adams, Anthony, Burnt, Bierke, Blaylock, Burtonshaw, Carlson, Cook, Den Hartog, Foreman, Galloway, Grow, Guthrie, Harris, Hart, Kaiser, Cole, Lakey, Lenny, Lent, Nichols, Okonowitz, Patterson, Ricks, Ruckty, Semoroth, Shippey, Taylor, Taves, Van Orden, Wintrow, Bowler, Woodward, Cito, Seiderveld, Adams, Anthony, Burnt,
The vote count shows 29 in favor with 6 against, a majority having voted in the affirmative. House Bill number 352 has passed the Senate. Hearing no correction of title, the title is approved and the bill will be returned to the House of Representatives. The Senate will now have before for final consideration House Bill number 381. The Senate Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 381 by Revenue and Taxation Committee, an act relating to taxation.
Mr. President.
Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of House Bill 381 be dispensed with and the journal show it's been read the third time at length, section by section, and is properly before the Senate for final consideration.
Hearing no objections, Senator, you have the floor to open the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, back in 2023, we allowed the State Tax Commission to use information from a credit card statement to qualify, to justify expenses in an audit. This piece of legislation just requires the Tax Commission to notify the taxpayer that those types of printed out records can be used for audit purposes related to credit or debit card or other electronic purchases, that those are eligible for the audit function. Debate is open.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, Senator Den Hartog, you have the floor to close the debate.
Debate is closed.
Debate is closed. The question before the Senate is, shall House Bill number 381 pass the Senate?
Mr. President.
Senator Harris.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent. The roll call vote used for the passage of House Bill 321 be now used for the passage of House Bill 381.
Is there an objection? Hearing none, the vote count shows 35 in favor with none against. House Bill number 381 has passed the Senate. Hearing no correction of the title is approved and the bill will be returned to the august body across the rotunda. The Senate will now have before for final consideration House
Mr.
Bill
President.
number...
Sorry.
Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that House Bill 135 hold its place on the calendar for one legislative day.
Is there an objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. The Senate, well, let's see what we got here. The Senate will now have before for final consideration Joint Resolution number 6. The Senate Secretary will read the resolution.
In the House of Representatives, House Joint Resolution 6 by Ways and Means Committee, a joint resolution proposing an amendment to Article 10 of the Constitution of the State of Idaho by the addition of a new Section 8, Article 10, relating to
Mr.
English.
President,
Senator Lenny.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of, House Joint Resolution 6 be dispensed with, and the journal show it has been read the third time at length, section by section, and placed before the Senate for final consideration.
Is there an objection? Hearing none. Senator Lenny, you have the floor to begin the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a resolution that essentially says that language matters. It speaks to who we are as a nation. It binds us together as a people. It ties us to our history, our heroes, and our heritage. And this bill, if passed, puts a question on the ballot next November, asking the Idaho voters if they want to add this to the Constitution. I'm just going to read from the bill. English, the official state language. The English language shall be the official language for the state of Idaho. Except as required by federal law, English shall be used in all public proceedings, public documents, public instruction, and any other public acts of any public institution in the state of Idaho. You know, this shouldn't be a controversial topic. I don't know if it is. I guess we'll find out. But, you know, France, their official language is French. Saudi Arabia, Arabic. Japan, their official language is Japanese. Kind of makes sense, right? Naturalized citizens, if someone wants to become a naturalized citizen in America, they are required to be proficient in reading and writing and speaking English. Most of them who you talk to are excited about doing so. So this bill essentially just puts a stake in the ground, taking what's already in code. This is already in code. It's not really being followed in a lot of ways. For example, we're hiring translators in schools in some areas when we should just be teaching them English. It just takes it in code and puts it into the Constitution. Mr. President, I'd like to read a section from an executive order from President Trump from March 1st, 2025, if that's all right.
Having cited the source, Senator, you may read.
So this is another one of those bills that's mirroring what's going on at the national level, and we want to. A lot of those things I think are great ideas for Idaho as well. So reading an executive order President Trump put out this month says that on making English the official language of the United States of America, says to promote unity, cultivate a shared American culture for all citizens, ensure consistency in government operations, and create a pathway to civic engagement. It is in America's best interest for the federal government to designate one and only one official language. Establishing English as the official language will not only streamline communication, but also reinforce shared national values and create a more cohesive and efficient society. I think it's a good idea for any nation to have an official language. I think it's a good idea for America to do it, and I think it's a good idea for Idaho to do it. So with that, Mr. President, debate is open.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President,
Senator Winthrop,
debate against the resolution.
you have the floor, Senator.
Mr. President, Senators, I mean, it's pretty clear that English is our official language, and now we're going to spend $300,000 to put it on the ballot when we are struggling to pay the bills as it is. I don't think there's any discrepancy or any misunderstanding that English is the official language. And the concern that I do have, though, is would it impact areas like court reporting, interpretation of court services? I know I heard the issue about interpretation services, but for refugee kids and others who are just learning the language, it's not a bad thing to help them learn the language. I guess I just think this is a wasteful use of taxpayer dollars to put that on the ballot when we already know that English is our official language and we do everything in English. So with that, I will vote no.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President,
Senator Nichols,
to debate on this resolution.
you have the floor.
Thank you. I've lived in another country, and never once did I feel that they should cater to me. I went and took classes so that I could learn and be able to speak the language there. I felt it was very important to do that, and that I was a foreigner coming into their country. I have family members that have come from other countries, and the big thing that we did when we knew that they were going to be coming and living here in the United States was to make sure that we helped them learn English, because that would help them to not only become part of our nation here, but also help them just in living their life here in the United States. And so we worked very hard, and they were very proud once they picked up on the language and that they could communicate with other people. So I think this is a very noteworthy piece of legislation that, and I've always thought that English should be our official language. When people come into our country, when people come into our state, it makes things a lot easier for them if they can facilitate speaking in English. And I think a lot of people that I've talked to that have come from other countries are very proud to be able to speak English and to learn the language and be able to communicate. So I'll support this resolution. I think it makes sense. And with that, Mr. President, thank you.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, Senator Lenny, you're recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. With regard to the fiscal note of $300,000, we had another one of these already passed, and it's my understanding that each joint resolution that passes, that we're already putting something out to the voters anyhow. So the existing fiscal note has actually, I think, overstated the case. So it's going to be a lot less expensive. But with that, debate is closed, Mr. President.
Debate is closed. The question before the Senate is, shall House Joint Resolution number 6 pass the Senate? The fact that this is a resolution requires 2/3 of the body or 24 votes for passage. The secretary will call the roll.
Adams. Anthony. Byrne. Bierke. Blaylock. Burtonshaw. Carlson. Cook. Den Hartog. Foreman. Galloway. Grow. Guthrie. Harris. Hart. Kaiser. Cole. Lakey. Lenny. Lind. Nichols. Okonowitz. Patterson. Ricks. Rutte. Samaroff. Shippey. Taylor. Taves. Van Orden. Winthrop. Bowler. Woodward. Cito. Seiderveld. Kaiser.
The vote count shows 30 in favor with 5 against, a majority having voted in the affirmative, and 2/3 having voted in the affirmative. House Joint Resolution has passed the Senate and will be returned to the House of Representatives. The Senate will now have before it for final consideration House Bill number 263 as amended in the Senate. The Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 263, as amended in the Senate by Ways and Means Committee, an act relating to taxation to provide that...
President?
Senator Galloway.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of House Bill 263, as amended in the Senate, be dispensed with, and the journals show it has been read the third time at length, section by section, and placed before the Senate for final consideration.
Is there an objection? Hearing none. Senator Galloway, you have the floor to open debate.
Thank you. This bill is from my friend across the rotunda. He had an issue with a constituent that works in animal rescue adoption, and there was some confusion with the tax commission on whether these animal rescues should be taxed or not taxed, and whether that was a service or a product. And so this bill clarifies that when conducting an animal rescue, that is a service and cannot be taxed by the tax commission. When this bill came over to the House, our pro tem helped amend it to make it a little bit more favorable to cities that also run animal shelters. And with that, we have a great tax reduction bill.
Is there further debate? Hearing none. Senator Galloway, you have the floor to close debate. Debate is closed. The question before the Senate is, shall House Bill number 263, as amended in the Senate, pass the Senate? Senator Harris.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the roll call vote used for the passage of House Bill 321 be now used for the passage of House Bill 263 as amended in the Senate.
Hearing no objection, the vote count shows 35 in favor with none against, a majority having voted in the affirmative. House Bill number 263, as amended in the Senate, has passed the Senate. Hearing no correction of the title is approved. The bill will be returned to the House of Representatives. The Senate will now have before it for final consideration House Bill number 174 as amended in the Senate. The Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 174, as amended in the Senate by Transportation and Defense Committee, an act relating to motor vehicles, relating to towing and storage.
President?
Senator Kaiser.
Mr. President, I ask for unanimous consent that further reading of House Bill 174 as amended be dispensed with, and that the journal show has been read a third time at length, section by section, and placed before the Senate for final.
Is there an objection? Hearing none. Senator Kaiser, you have the floor to open the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 174 as amended repeals Chapter 18, Title 49 in Idaho Code and creates a new chapter relating to the towing and storage of motor vehicles. This bill has been worked on for several years by the Sheriff's Association, Towing Association, Idaho Transportation Department, the goal being to create uniformity and transparency to modernize the towing and storage process. Currently, they use snail mail to notify an owner or lien holder of a vehicle, creating unnecessary delays. And then there's confusion of who owns the property as it gets stored for long periods of time. So what this will do, it'll use the current ILET system with Idaho Transportation Department. It's going to allow sections for the towing companies to add their information. It's going to have an area that has authorized towings in that specific location or municipality. It's going to have an online portal for owners and lien holders to be able to access so that they know where their vehicle is being held, for how long it's been there. It'll show the fee rate schedule of the towing facility that's holding on to the vehicle. And then there was some initial concerns regarding language related to commercial property. So that's now been added into the amended version to satisfy those concerns. So again, this would be a good bill so that owners of towed vehicles will know where and how to get their vehicle back and how much. And all the stakeholders were working on this, and they've all come up with a good resolution. So I urge your aye vote. With that, Mr. President, debate is open.
Is there further debate? Hearing none. Sir Kaiser, you have the floor to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Debate is closed.
Debate is closed. The question before us is, shall House Bill number 174, as amended in the Senate, pass the Senate? Senator Harris.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent. The roll call vote used for the passage of House Bill 321 be now used for the passage of House Bill 174 as amended in the Senate.
Is there an objection? Hearing none, the vote count shows 35 in favor with none against. A majority having voted in the affirmative. House Bill number 174 is amended. The Senate has passed the Senate. Hearing no correction of title, the title is approved and the bill will be returned to the House of Representatives. The Senate will now have before it for final consideration House Bill number 239 as amended in the Senate. The Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 239, as amended in the Senate by Education Committee, an act relating to education, to establish provisions requiring permission for instruction addressing human sexuality.
Mr. President.
Senator Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent that further reading of House Bill 239 as amended be dispensed with and that the journal show it has been read the third time at length, section by section, and placed before the Senate for final consideration.
Hearing no objection, Senator Nichols, you have the floor to open the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a crucial piece of legislation that ensures parents remain the primary decision makers regarding their children's education on sensitive topics like human sexuality. This bill reaffirms the role of parents in guiding their children's education and provides clear protections for parental rights. Parents are the primary stakeholders in their children's upbringing, and this bill ensures that they retain that right to make informed decisions about what their children learn in school. Specifically, this bill requires schools to notify parents 2 weeks in advance of any instruction on human sexuality as narrowly defined in Section 33-1609 of Idaho Code. Parents will be given the opportunity to review the material if they wish and must provide written consent before their children participate in such lessons. If no consent is given, alternative educational instruction will be provided. It is important to clarify that it is not the intent of the legislature to require or include instruction on human sexuality in Idaho public schools, and that is inside this piece of legislation. This bill simply ensures that parents are fully informed and have control over what their children are taught on this sensitive matter. While we trust the vast majority of educators, we recognize that there have been instances across the country and in Idaho where inappropriate content has made its way into the classroom. This bill safeguards against these situations. It also includes provisions that ensure school boards adopt policies and procedures to investigate alleged violations, and any public school employee found in violation of the bill's provision may be subject to disciplinary action. Moreover, if a parent believes that their child has been taught human sexuality material without their consent, they can bring this to the Board of Trustees, and that board adopts the policies and procedures to handle those issues, and all remedies must be exhausted before disciplinary action is taken. Let me emphasize the importance of this bill. Once a child is exposed to sensitive material, they cannot unsee it. Parents should have the power to decide what their children are exposed to, especially in relations to matters as personal as human sexuality. This bill ensures that the family remains the central institution for guiding children's moral and educational development. This bill complements and reinforces multiple titles of current Idaho Code, such as in 32-1010, 32-1011, 32-1012, and 13, 33-1608, 33-1609, and so forth. There are many. And it also includes those related to parental rights, transparency in education, and the protection of children. But by aligning with and strengthening these existing laws, House Bill 239 provides a cohesive and comprehensive approach to safeguarding the values and interests of Idaho families. By passing this bill, we send a clear message that Idaho respects parental rights and is committed to protecting children from inappropriate content in school. We are affirming that the role of parents is paramount in decisions that affect the children's well-being and education. Senators, you have a packet of just different testimonies that are on your table to be able to look through. But with that, Mr. President, debate is open.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Rudke.
Debate against the bill.
You have the floor.
You know, the concept of local control it's not magic. I know we throw the term around almost to the point that I think we forget why it's an important concept in our form of government. But this is a pretty good example. You know, we're kind of getting to the point where when parents are dissatisfied with something that's happening in their school district, they grab their local legislator and they seem to be having them run a bill to fix it. But that's not really the way the system is designed to work. I mean, all that does is add more laws to our books, more pages to our code books. What really should happen is they should go and work it out with the district. Now, I suspect somebody's going to say, well, so-and-so tried. But I really doubt all these people are going to their school districts and trying to work it out. And that's where school districts learn. If something's going wrong, if they're not doing business right, my guess is they're going to try to fix it. That is just human nature, and that's how these things work. Can it not work sometimes? Yeah, sure. Sometimes it can't, or it doesn't work out like it's supposed to. But making a bill every time somebody doesn't get the satisfaction they want or the system doesn't work the way they want isn't really the solution either. There are local elections. You can get a new school board member. If there's an administrator who you don't think is doing their job, you can complain to the school board or the superintendent. There's just better ways of handling this. And I would point out there is a private cause of action in this bill. I won't go through those again, but I don't think that's the way to do this sort of legislation. Local control is an important principle because it allows these issues to be worked out locally. It forces local stakeholders and members of the community to work together to solve these problems instead of us creating a solution that may or may not address the issue being complained of, and it may create other problems for other school districts. And it just takes responsibility and the ability to tailor solutions away from our local elected officials and community members. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Senator Lenny.
to debate the bill.
You have the floor.
I don't see anything here that should be controversial. You know, we're asking teachers and schools to show the parents what they want to teach their children. And I don't think teachers could have anything to lose here unless their desire is to teach kids something they think the parents might object to. I mean, reading this handout that the senator from District 10 put on our desk is tip of the iceberg, I think, with some of the things going on in our schools. The senator from 29 said when parents encounter a problem, they grab a legislator and have them run a bill, and that's not how it should work. I think that's exactly how it should work. I think that's how it was designed to work. Bottom-up, grassroots policymaking. We take issues that are going on in our districts, we get with our citizens, and we craft legislation to fix problems. You know, the kids who go to these public schools, contrary to popular belief, or maybe it used to be popular. I think it's losing popularity now. These kids don't belong to the state. They don't belong to the school. They don't belong to the classroom. They don't belong to the teacher. They don't belong to the school district. They belong to their parents. That used to be common sense before 2008. And I think this bill just solidifies what we used to strive for as Americans. And it's a great bill, and I would encourage everybody's aye vote. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President,
Senator Blaylock,
to debate the bill.
you have the floor.
Talking about local control, as I was flipping through this handout, I noticed one of my constituents here who had an issue with this type of curriculum being taught in the school. And they did the local control thing and were successful and implemented an opt-in in our school district within one of the school districts in my legislative district. That is the right way to do it, and it was successful, and I applaud her for trying to bring that statewide, because I do think it's appropriate when we're talking about things like this so outside of the purview of what education should be are these topics. As a mom of 2 school-age kids, I absolutely think that these subjects should be opt-in if they're going to be covering those in their educational settings.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President,
Senator Foreman,
to debate in favor.
have the floor.
The real question here, Mr. President, is should a parent be notified in advance when this type of subject matter is going to be introduced to the students? And for the life of me, do we really need to even ask that question? I'm a parent. I know plenty of parents. I can't think of a single parent that I know that wouldn't want to know about this in advance. That gives the parent the chance to live up to his or her responsibilities as a parent and make a decision. And for the life of me, I can't understand why any teacher or school district would not want to comply with that. It's just common sense, and it baffles me that we even need to bring legislation to enforce common sense, but I'll be supporting the bill. It's just kind of a sad state of affairs that we have to resort to this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President,
Senator Wintrow.
would the senator from 10 stand for a question?
Senator Nichols, will you yield?
I'll yield.
Senator yields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator from 10. The one thing that kind of got my attention here is the content of sexual violence or sexual abuse. And I do know that there are child prevention organizations all over the country. One has contacted me to run legislation to do training in schools for child sexual abuse prevention. So I'm wondering how this might, I understand that the bill would have to have the teachers say, hey, in 2 weeks, we're going to have this child sexual abuse prevention activity. What I am concerned about is the kids that are going to get pulled from that in case, unfortunately, they are experiencing abuse. Is this a concern that you could address in this, I guess, maybe share with what you, how can you address that concern?
Senator Nichols.
Mr. President and Senator from 19, again, this goes back to parental consent. So the parent is informed. If that is the topic of discussion, it is up to the parent to determine if they want their child to participate in that.
Thank you, Senator from 10. And Mr. President, to debate against the bill.
You have the floor, Senator.
I think, as I heard from the senator from 6, yeah, parents want to know what's getting taught in the class. I can understand that. And if I'm teaching an English class and, I have my curriculum available for the rest of the year, here are the books we're going to read and the discussions, The Handmaid's Tale or The Bluest Eye, whatever it is, parents can determine, I don't want my kid to read that book. I get that. But there are things that do come up in the classroom that, even if you've opted in, that you wouldn't even have thought would come up in a classroom discussion. Now, I've talked to many teachers, and I think they handle this pretty well. But I think the problem with us legislating so broadly is that sometimes we're capturing like the everyday things that we're not even really aware of that happen in classrooms. and interferes sometimes with teaching and relationships with students. So my biggest concern, though, is how this might inhibit the teaching and prevention of child sexual abuse, especially in the case where maybe the family members are the abusers. And we couldn't talk broadly and age appropriately about what bad touching is or what to do if that happens. I think those are important conversations, especially for elementary kids, to make sure we're actually creating an environment that's safe to them, that they could report something. Because I bet you there are a lot of teachers that get reports from kids that they're getting harmed by family members. And I would hate to do anything that would get in the way of that.
Is there further debate? Hearing none. Senator Nichols, you're recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to all that participated in the debate of this bill. This is a common sense bill. This is an approach. This is about parental control. That is what it's about, and it's about being informed of what our children are learning and participating in school. This is a common sense measure. It restores parental control in the classroom and safeguards the values of Idaho families. I urge your yes vote on this, and with that, Mr. President, debate is closed.
Debate is closed. The question before the Senate is, shall House Bill number 239 as amended in the Senate pass the Senate? The Secretary will call the roll.
Adams. Anthon. Burnt. Pierkey. Blaylock. Burnshaw. Carlson. Cook. Den Hartog. Foreman. Galloway. Grow. Guthrie. Harris. Hart. Kaiser. Cole. Lakey. Lenny. Lind. Nichols. Okonowitz. Patterson. Ricks. Ruckty. Semoroth. Shippey. Taylor. Taves. Van Orden. Wintrow. Wooler. Woodward. Cito. Seiderveld.
The vote count shows 29 in favor, 6 in opposition. House Bill number 239 as amended. The Senate has passed the Senate. Hearing no correction of the title, the title is approved and the bill will be returned to the House.
Mr. President.
Senator Harris.
Is House Bill 130 as amended in the Senate in this order of business? You're welcome.
Yes, it is.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the House Bill 130 as amended in the Senate be sent to the 14th order. May I explain?
You have the floor.
For more possible amendments, Mr. President.
Heard the request.
Sponsor.
Is there objection? Hearing none. House Bill number 130 as amended. The Senate will be referred to the 14th order of business for possible amendment.
Mr. President.
Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate return to the 5th order of business.
Without objection, the Senate will return to the 5th order of business, presentation of petitions, resolutions, and memorials. The Senate is at the 5th order of business.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate advance to the 6th order of business.
Without objection, the Senate will advance to the 6th order of business, reports of standing committees. The Senate is at the 6th order.
Mr. President, I ask the Senate go at ease for any announcements or introductions.
The Senate will be at ease. Senator Zito.
I'd like to make an announcement. I would like to announce that on the second floor, there are a group of parents, teachers, and students and administrators who love school choice and are parents of school choice children, and they brought cookies to the legislators today. They're from the Isla School, and they would like to invite you to come to the second floor and enjoy a cookie with them and visit with them about their amazing program. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator Adams.
Mr. President and good senators, you probably saw this lamp on your desk. This is because you have agreed, and thank you to all 35 of you for agreeing to be an ambassador to your district for America 250. This is the 1F by land and 2F by sea, and we all know that it was by sea, But we don't have a C in Idaho, so you're going to have to take your one and go back to your districts and tell everyone. Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Senator Lynn,
Mr. President, for announcement,
you have the floor.
Senate Education will meet today at 2.
2 o'clock. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Senator Van Orden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Health and Welfare will be meeting today at 2 o'clock also.
Mr. President,
Senator Anthony.
for introduction and announcement.
You have the floor, Senator.
First for announcement, the chairman will not meet on Thursday of this week. So please note that. And also by way of introduction, in the gallery is Christine Handy, who is a constituent of mine and the wife of Representative Clay Handy. I see her son is here, and also some other family members who I do not know their names, but I know they're connected. But these folks are from my district, and I just want to welcome them to the chamber today.
Mr. President.
Senator Harris.
Introduction.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, in the gallery today is also some people from my end of the state, Megan Smith and her kids, Hiram, Ezra, Charlotte, and Isaac. Please welcome them to the Senate.
Mr. President,
Senator Ricks.
for announcement,
You have the floor.
while we're making an announcement about committee meetings, local government and taxes meeting as well at 2 o'clock today.
Mr. President, for an introduction,
Senator Blaylock.
I see my sister and one of my favorite nieces that just walked in. So please welcome them to the Senate.
Senator Conowitz.
Thank you, Mr. President, for an announcement. The Transportation Committee is meeting today at 1. FYI, it was posted, but just because we're late, I want to make sure everybody knows.
They're fast readers.
Mr. President, for an announcement, just to break the trend, Commerce Committee will not meet today.
Senate's in order. Senate's in the 6th order of business.
Mr. President.
Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate recess until 3 p.m. today.
Mr. President, I second the motion.
You've heard the motion that we adjourn or recess until 3. And all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We'll see you at 3. The Senate is in recess.
We now return to our regularly scheduled programming. For complete legislative coverage, watch or stream Idaho Reports or Idaho in Session at idahoptv.org. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. We now return to our regularly scheduled program.